we've always in the church had times where there were tough discussions. The coronavirus, the COVID-19, Wuhan flu, whatever you want to call it, this virus and what's going on with it, especially in our nation here. We don't know a whole lot about how other nations are handling it, but we know pretty much now what's going on with it. We've had to deal with something that we've never had to deal with before. But it doesn't change the fact that there have been tough discussions that have gone on in our sessions and various ministry meetings at all levels, from the General Synod down to the music committee of the church, as examples where there have been times where there are tough discussions or crucial discussions, and I've seen some of those handled pretty daggone well, and I've seen some of those discussions handled in a way that probably somebody should have yelled time out. We need to pause and step back now and think about this a little bit. So first of all, let me give you my little definition of a tough conversation. A tough conversation usually is one where there's at least two people that have opposing opinions or viewpoints or perspectives that differ from each other in a pretty wide range. The second aspect of a really tough discussion is a lot of time emotions come into play. There are really strong emotions, and you can pick a subject and in any church, wherever you may be, and there are some people sometimes that will get very emotional about something, especially when they feel very important, that the issue is very important to them, and that they have a very strong viewpoint themselves, and they just have difficulty with people who have a viewpoint that's different than their own. And then the other aspect of some of these tough discussions is there could be some major importance into whatever decision comes out of that discussion. We could be discussing a motion in a session meeting. It could be in a deacon's meeting. It might be in a women's ministry meeting. And someone brings up an idea or something, and the discussion starts. And all of a sudden it becomes apparent that whatever decision we make could have long-term or strong, lasting consequences to the folks that will be subject to the decision that we make. So there are a lot of aspects to it. So let's think about opposing opinions, strong emotions on the subject, and the issue may have some significant outcome as a result of the decision that's made. So if we think about these, and maybe you've been in some of these discussions, and some of them maybe turned out very well, and some of them just, the discussion went downhill for whatever reason, whatever it might be. What we need to realize is everybody has different viewpoints. They come into discussions with different backgrounds of experience, length of experience. Maybe they've experienced something similar in another church, and something's being proposed for your church, and it didn't go well in the other church, and you don't think it's going to go well with this church or with this group or whatever it is. And so the way we handle those differences of opinion and we handle that discussion, a lot of times will determine how good the outcome is at the end of the meeting, depending on your personality. Now, there are some folks who have a tendency to try to avoid these serious discussions. Their techniques may be different, but they really do not want to discuss the issue at all. They may become passive aggressive. They may try to change the subject. They may try to say that they don't see a need for this discussion, or they might just be very apparently quiet. They withdraw and refuse to enter into the discussion unless they're drugged into it. Some people just like to avoid the reality of a confrontation. They see that if I say what I'm thinking in my mind and what I'd like to contribute to this discussion may create hard feelings on the part of other people, rather than creating those hard feelings, or rather than getting into a confrontational or potentially confrontational situation, what I'll do is I'll try to just be quiet and not get into it unless I'm asked for my opinion or whatever. There are some people who have a difficult time looking beyond just the decision itself to what are called, in many circles, unintended consequences. Sometimes we don't think very well about how that decision is going to impact those folks around us in the days, weeks, months, maybe even years down the road. There are lots of, the most serious discussion, besides theological discussions, of course, the most serious discussion I can think of is a discussion about whether or not to hire a particular person as church's minister. Those are serious discussions by a search committee and by a session. They should be serious, but there are ways to handle these discussions that are better than others, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. And then I'm going to say something. We're using technology today, but I'm going to tell you that there is a time and place for technology, and there is a time and place for individual, good old face-to-face discussion. There are people I've seen people try to avoid or try to push their own point on their perspective using text and emails, using those technologies today. And I will say that there is a place for text. There's also a place for emails. But I'm also going to tell you, when we get into some of these serious discussions, there are things that a text doesn't tell me. It doesn't tell me the body language. It doesn't tell me the emotions of the individual involved. It doesn't tell me how they may not be able to express in an email their particular reasoning for why they take this particular point of view or perspective. And I can tell you from a few challenging examples from years ago when everybody was using email, from from discussions I had via email, where I finally reached the point, hey, we're not going to solve this with email. We're not going to solve this with text. You and I need to go have a cup of coffee or go have breakfast together and discuss this person to person or small group to small group. I've had meetings with small groups of deacons before. I've had one-on-one discussions. I've had all-day training sessions with church leaders in which I feel still today that the best way to do those is face-to-face. And I'll tell you, our session throughout this pandemic, we're a session of 4 elders and a pastor, so there's only 5 of us. We've social distanced ourselves, and we've continued to meet on a face-to-face basis so that we can all share in the same information at the same time. We're all on the same point when we're talking about a particular issue or a proposal or an idea or a decision that needs to be made, and we're continuing to meet. Now, that may not be practical for some people, but we're able to do it. So just a little internal summary here. Sometimes we avoid, or we try to avoid confronting the issue. We're afraid we're going to upset someone else and negatively impact the relationship that we have with them. Sometimes we're afraid to make tough choices. And I haven't said this yet in this, but in this day and age, in dealing with church decisions and dealing with the virus and the pandemic and our response to it, I don't think there's any group in any church who can make any decision with 100% assurance that what they've done is the right decision. They've tried to take the best information that they have at the time. I think most all of us have tried that. And we've made decisions, and when we've communicated those decisions with our church members, we've basically said to them in a little bit nicer way, but stay tuned for further developments. Our decision is based on what we know today. What we know tomorrow and next week may change that decision and may give us more information. And we may, in light of that, decide that we may need to make a slight adjustment or something. So, and the last thing, in the way of a little bit of review, I go back to this issue of emotions. The good Lord gave us all emotions. I mean, we have joy. We dance as a result of emotions. Sometimes we have disappointment. We feel that emotion. I'm aware that sometimes anger comes into play. But the good Lord gave us a full range of emotions, but in a group setting, whether the group is 2 people or whether it's 200 people, at some point, I don't know how we do it. I haven't figured this out yet, but we need to try to encourage people to at least keep control of their emotions and not let them get out of hand to the point where they're only responding based on an emotional level and not responding based on a level of thought. I hope that makes sense to you. It's called reasoned thinking, or discernment is another good word. Excuse me, I've got notes standing up here so I can stay on point. So how do people respond? They respond in different ways, and a lot of that is based on personality. And you have to understand people's personalities. And I'm going to say that there are a number of folks, and you've probably seen this in one way or the other. You've probably seen this in some meeting. You don't have to raise your hand as I look across the group of people who are on here, but they don't like any change at all. And some of you probably heard, well, we've never done it that way, or we've always done it that way. And either of those two positions, I think, is a position that does not allow for the fact that life and our churches and our organizations are in a different position now than we were even 3 months ago with this virus. So we're in a lot of new and uncharted territory. To say that, well, we've never done it that way. Well, we never had circumstances or situations that led us to believe that doing something in a particularly new way would be advantageous for us. that it would help the body, that it would give us a new avenue in order to serve the members of our church. So saying we've never done something this way, I think is an unthoughtful, and I'm just being transparent and straight with you. I'm a straight shooter. I think it's being unthoughtful and short-sighted to say, well, we've never done it that way, so why should we consider doing it that way now? So we have to be a little cautious about like that. And then there's also people who do not like change at all. It is what they call outside their normal. They have gotten in a comfort zone. We have always done it this way in this church, and I like that. I don't want to change that. I don't even want to discuss changing it. I won't think about changing it. If y'all change this, that, or the other, I'm going to take my baseball bat and my glove and I'm going to go home, or I'm going to go play on another team. And so that comes into play. So with all that being said as a backdrop, realizing we're all different, the Lord created us all different. He gave us all different skill sets. The Holy Spirit's given us all different gifts. When we come together in some of these tough times for these tough decisions, there are some things that we should do and there are some things that we shouldn't do. And I'll call them nuggets, if you will. Or a friend of mine, when he goes down through something like this, he calls them zingers. So I just like to call them nuggets. My first nugget to you, and I'm just going to list them. There's about, let's say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 9 of them listed here on my on my notes for this session. And I'm going to just go through them kind of fast. I can expound upon any of them if I need to, but when having tough discussions, the first bullet point, first nugget would be to ask for and listen closely to others' opinions and viewpoints. We really need to pay attention to what other people are thinking when we get into talking about whatever the issue is. And we need to listen closely. Now, some of us, as Brent mentioned, I spent 32 years as an air traffic controller. I can make a decision quick. And I was trained to always have a backup decision. If plan A wasn't going to work well for me and keep everybody separated and keeping everybody moving in and out of the airports, then I better have a plan B. But not a lot of people are like that. And one tendency that some personalities have is before somebody gets halfway through making their point, the other person has already evaluated it and has an opinion on it, up or down, and they are waiting for their turn to get in and respond without waiting closely and listening closely to what the other perspective is on the issue. Number 2, and this one is vital, be totally respectful to every person and their viewpoint. These discussions, there's no place for sarcasm. There is no place for saying, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That will shut down a conversation and put a chill on any kind of important discussion whatsoever. We need to be 100% respectful for every person and every person's viewpoint. Whether we think it has merit or not, we have got to be totally respectful. Number 3, as a leader, we need to take ownership that if there's a situation that needs a solution, I need to be a part of trying to find what the best solution is. It may not be a perfect solution. Sometimes it can't be. I mean, we could talk about a number of questions here, like right now, a question across the church in the United States is, when do we reopen our church for worship within the church walls? within the building walls. And every single one of our churches is different. They're living in different states with different restrictions placed on them by government or different requests. I mean, but we need to take ownership of our particular situation, and we need to be looking for the best overall solution for whatever the issue is. And you can take the virus away. What's the best solution when part of the church wants to put a green roof on and part of the church wants to put a red roof on the church, and the church is divided? Or the choir is having a discussion about whether to wear choir robes or not. I mean, some of these are just are serious issues. They can be serious issues in the church. They can be divisive issues. But we need to not avoid the issue, but to take ownership of the fact that there is an issue, and therefore I need to try to be a part of finding the best solution. Bullet point number 4 is be truthful and balanced in the way you share your view. Let's be honest. We've probably all run across somebody who had their own agenda. At the elder level, sometimes they're called the boss elder, the one who always wants to push their particular perspective or viewpoint. They think they're the only one that's right, and that half of the people are wrong, and their way, it's my way or the highway. We're going to do it this way, or we're not going to do it. Or you can go somewhere else. I mean, let's be honest. This is a practical side of ministry. We need to be truthful as much as we know truth to be, and we need to be balanced in the way we share our viewpoints, rather than trying to push a particular agenda. Our viewpoint should be, this is God's church. We are his servants. We have been elected or called to serve in some capacity, and we are serving his church, and our own agendas don't have any place in it. I'm sorry. We've got to have the bigger context that it's Christ's church. So we need to be truthful, and we need to be balanced when we share views. And sometimes, next bullet point is, we need to help everyone clarify what the real issues are. I've been in meetings where everybody was agreeable about the outcome that they wanted to see, but then the differences started coming either in the method, what methodology we were going to use in order to try to reach this outcome, or what kind of time frame. I've seen there are folks who think, no, that's moving too fast. No, that's not moving fast enough. Or we could use a particular method. We could move everything to this new style of ministry, or we could move everything to this new style of music, or we could do this. Well, how are we going to do that? Are we going to transition slowly over a period of time? Are we going to do it all at once? So even when we agree on the outcome, we need to also think about what the real issue is. The issue could be how we're going to do it, the method. The issue could be in what kind of time frame are we going to try to accomplish this. It might be a building project. It could be any number of things. And we're still, in spite of the fact that we're in this, dealing with this issues around this pandemic, I mean, life's going on. We've got churches who have building programs going on. We've got churches who are looking for new pastors. We have churches who are just trying to figure out how to balance the finances for the church in light of what their income is every month, what the giving is like. So We need to clarify and make sure we understand what the real issue is in its context. And that's the next bullet point, which is make sure you understand the larger context. Is the issue really a safety issue? Might be. Might it be a financial issue? Might it be a scriptural issue? I have seen churches go through challenges where there was a difference of understanding of theology. And those differences of interpretation or understanding of theology created these tough discussions and these tough situations. And remember, I go back to the bullet point before, we need to make sure that we understand everybody's opinions, that we're respectful of those, that we take ownership of the fact that we need to be a part of the solution. We need to be truthful and we need to be balanced using God's perspective, God's viewpoint, not our own agenda. And we need to make sure we clarify that that issue really is a larger issue than what we're just talking about. My next bullet point is to make sure we get everyone's perspective. This may sound like a repeat of bullet point number 1, listening to other viewpoints. But what we need to understand is we need to be looking around in the meeting, and the larger the meeting is, I've been in session meetings where there were 3-4 of us committee members meeting with a session of 16 elders. The larger the meeting is, the easier it is for someone to sit back and hide and be quiet and not share their perspective into the larger pool of understanding. And sometimes it's those people who are very thoughtful, who are very mature in their Christian faith, and they have something to contribute that maybe no one else has contributed so far to the discussion. And we need to get them into the discussion. Draw out your quiet members. Encourage the free flow of relevant information. Even sometimes ask somebody, Sam, what do you think about this particular thing from your perspective? And they may have something very important to add to the pool of the information. Also, I'm going to say that sometimes we're not going to be able to reach consensus or to reach a good, clear majority on an issue. And we just plain need to give everyone some time to process information. I know on our small session of 4 elders and a pastor, there have been a couple of things that we have discussed within the last 90 days where, as we got into this discussion, we all realized that there was more to this discussion than what we understood. And we all needed some time to process this. And so a motion was made to table the issue and bring it back at a later meeting, after everyone's had a chance to do some research, some review, some reading in the Word, some praying about it, some asking for the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And we know that the Holy Spirit, one of the things I pray for daily with my wife and in my prayer time is wisdom and discernment in all things. Because there is so much going on today. We need God's wisdom and we need His discernment, because we have trouble a lot of times right now discerning what is truth from what is fiction or what is partial truth when we get things from the media. And I don't care what media you're talking about, and I don't care whether you're talking about a Republican Party, the Democratic Party, or the Tea Party, or whatever party it is. When we talk about, because politics is driving a lot of what's going on in our country today with decision making. So that's the reason I bring that up. So sometimes we just need to table something and give everybody a chance to breathe. If it's an emotionally charged discussion, this gives everybody a chance to, okay, let's slow this down a little bit. Let's get control of my emotions a little bit. Let's think a little bit about some of the things I've already heard, the discussions we've already had. Well, let me pray on this a little bit. Well, let me ask the Holy Spirit how the Spirit thinks we should proceed, and just table it. There are very few things in the life of the church I have found that are what I'd call an emergency decision, where the decision needs to be made absolutely right now, tonight, or this morning, or whenever the session is meeting, or whatever. And so the tougher the discussion is, and the tougher the topic is, maybe sometimes it's best to be able to back away. And here, my last bullet point on this is sometimes we have to be willing to take some calculated risks in our decision. As I alluded to earlier, none of us as sessions or deacons or women's ministries, my wife is on our women's ministry team. We have 4 deacons at our church, and we've had discussions between the session and the deacons about practical matters as we've reopened our church and all of this. We need to be willing to take some calculated risk with the decisions that we make. We cannot be, in many cases right now, we cannot be 100% certain that the decision that we're making is right. This is fact of life from my perspective. And you may have a different viewpoint, and I wouldn't argue with you about your viewpoint, but I just don't see where right now, I'm 71, I've been through lots of things. I've been through hurricanes, and I've been through war, and I've been through lots of stuff in my life. I've been through church splits, been through lots of things that I've seen, and sometimes there is no 100% assurance that the vote I'm about to cast, or the decision or the operation we're about to go into is going to work. I mentioned earlier having a plan B. Sometimes it might be advisable, even when you're taking a risk on a decision, to always have a plan B in your pocket. If this doesn't work out, it doesn't have the effect that we hope it will, then let's think about going to a plan B. All right, let me give you a few bullet points here. I've got about 5 of them as we're getting close to Q&A time. These are things that should be avoided. In my opinion, they should be avoided at all costs. Do not tolerate any member's attempt at bullying the entire group to their particular viewpoint. I don't think I need to say anything else to that. Do not tolerate personal attacks or name calling. There is no place where we're issue oriented, we're mission oriented. This is God's church, and we are his servants. And personal attacks don't have any place in this. Keep it to the issue. Do not allow sarcastic remarks. Sarcastic remarks will chill out any good conversation that may be going on right now about issues. And sarcasm always is intended to take a pot shot at somebody, because you don't think, somebody doesn't think that somebody else's viewpoint is a good viewpoint or a valid viewpoint, so they'll be sarcastic with them. That may be the last time you hear that person share their perspective, if they're the subject of the sarcasm. Do not be influenced by emotional outbursts. I talked a little bit earlier about controlling emotions. We're also different. And some of us wear our emotions on our sleeves. Some of us, any emotional thought that comes into our brain comes right out our mouth without a whole lot of thought sometimes. Sometimes you ever said something and you wish you could cram it back in there? Boy, I wish I hadn't have said that. That was not helpful to the discussion. I have to admit I'm guilty of that on a couple of occasions, especially in my early years. Don't be influenced by these emotional outbursts. Do not be resistant to change without a sound reasoning. I've already talked about this a little bit in circling around. There are reasons to be resistant to change. If we have a different understanding of theological doctrine, or we think we understand it one way and somebody else understands it another way. Church standards. If we don't understand our church standards, then we might be resistant to change because we've always done something one particular way and we've never taken a real hard look at the standards. Part of the standards is our guidelines for worship, for public worship. Part of it is we have in our standards is the book of discipline. Sometimes discipline needs to be taken, not avoided. Avoiding taking discipline when it's needed may lead to bigger and worse things within the life of the church. So there are times to be resistant to change, but it should never be without sound reasoning.